Alright, in this video, I want to take a look at the recent UK general election that happened on the 4th of July 2024. It was actually supposed to be held sometime later this year, but it was called early by the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. The result was very anticipated and kind of showed what most people had expected, what the polls were showing for over a year now, and that was the Labour Party under Keir Starmer won an absolute majority, a landslide victory, and Keir Starmer will become the next Prime Minister, ruling with his Labour Party over the UK for the next 5 years, or at least until the next House of Commons election is called, which most likely will not be until 2029. The Conservatives suffered a historic defeat, losing a record number of seats and votes. This was a disaster for them and a very decisive and clear outcome of this election. And in this video, I want to kind of give an overview of the results, both the vote share and the amount of seats for each party, to kind of show what happened, where it happened, and the reasons why. Now, if we take a look at the raw vote share and seat share, we can see that the Labour Party won 33.7% of the vote. This was a minor increase from what they got last time, and actually is somewhat of an underperformance. But the Conservative Party, of course, won only 23.7%. So a lot of the reason the Labour Party was able to win big was not because of their increase, but rather the complete collapse of the Conservative Party. The Labour Party had been somewhat polling higher, even going up into the high 40s, even reaching the 50s, but I mean, in the aggregate, pretty much around the high 30s over the past several months. So this was a small underperformance in the total vote share, and only an increase of 1.5 from what Jeremy Corbyn got in the 2019 UK election. However, due to the collapse of the Conservatives, with this small increase, they were able to gain around 211 seats. This was nearly doubling the amount of the seats they had, so they won a total of 411 in the House of Commons. That is enough for a majority, and of course they will be ruling the country now without having to need a coalition partner. The Conservatives lost 250 seats, falling to 121. This is even less seats they won in their defeat after Tony Blair's landslide victory in 1997. So the Conservatives suffered heavy losses while Labour doubled their amount of seats. Reform UK, led by Nigel Farage, won a significant amount of votes. They increased heavily from what the Brexit Party won in 2019, a lot of fact due to them running candidates in almost all the constituencies, and they won 14.3% of the vote. This was a moderate result. This, of course, was the third place. They were the biggest party behind Labour and the Conservatives, and they won 5 seats. The reason they won so few had to do with the UK's election system, so they did win a significant amount of votes, but of course winning 5 seats was important. It was, significant for a minor party, a third party outside of the political system, outside of, the three main that have participated in UK elections historically. The Liberal Democrats, which is also a very traditional party in Britain, they've been active in the political scene for decades now, even going back to their predecessor, the old Liberal Party, which was active over 100 years ago. They won a small increase in the vote share, going up to 12.2%, but they won a large amount of seats, going from 10 to around 70, so an increase of around 64 seats. Big victory for the Liberal Democrats, which profited also off of the total collapse of the Conservatives. The Green Party was also able to win some seats in some of their strongholds. They doubled their vote share, going up to 6.4%, gaining an additional 3 seats. Outside of the, England and Wales, you had in Scotland, the Scottish National Party suffered a huge defeat. They dropped in their vote share, and they suffered huge losses, losing 39 seats. So they went from around 48, I believe, to only 9, losing around 80% of their seats amongst the Scottish delegation for the UK Parliament. So a big defeat for the party. Of course, the SNP only competes in Scotland. They are a regional minority party. So for them, this is, of course, a bad result, losing most of their delegation. They are no longer the largest party in Scotland after this result. You also had a few independents who won, most notably Jeremy Corbyn, the former leader of the Labour Party, kind of the leader of the left-wing faction within the party. He was somewhat purged by Jeremy Corbyn. By Keir Starmer, and a lot of the people close to Corbyn were not able to run. There were a lot of Labour Party politicians kind of isolated from the party, and they ran as independents against the established Labour Party and won some of their seats. So that was, of course, a significant result in those constituencies. And then you have some of the results for Northern Ireland, which didn't change too much. Now, if you take a look up here, we can see the total vote share to seat share. Now, the UK elections are very different than the elections in the Netherlands or Germany or other countries that use proportional representation. Of course, UK uses a first-past-the-post system, very similar to France and the United States, and this means that there are 630 individual constituencies, and each party runs candidates in those constituencies, and whoever wins that seat. And so just because the vote share a party gets does not determine how many seats they get. It matters who wins in each of the individual constituencies, and we can see that the Labour Party, despite only winning 33.7% of the vote, they won 63% of the total seats. And that is because, they only won a third of the votes, but across at least the average, in the average seat, they were first place with this result, and they were able to win in 411 constituencies. The Conservatives won 23% of the vote with 18% of seats. The Liberal Democrats won 12.2% and around 12% of the seats, whereas Reform UK, led by Nigel Farage, won 14.3%, but only 0.8% of the seats. And the reason why the Liberal Democrats and Reform UK did around the same in terms of votes, but not around seats, had to do with the fact that Reform UK is a much newer party. Their vote is spread out widely, whereas the Liberal Democrats have a much more regional support. They have more on the ground campaign. They are active and organized in a lot of constituencies that they've been for decades, and so they have the name recognition. They have the incumbency factor. They have a lot of seats where they can focus on and concentrate support and win the individual seats. Reform maybe has more votes, but they aren't able to win a lot more votes in individual constituencies, and in the end be the largest party in a lot of the seats. Reform UK did very well in the Midlands. They came second place in a lot of constituencies, but that was not enough for them to win seats. If we take a look at the actual map, or rather the actual calculation of seats for the House of Commons, we can see that the Labour Party not only has a majority, but is clearly larger than all of the other parties combined. So the Labour Party will be able to run the UK without opposition for the next 5 years at least. Keir Starmer will have a very comfortable majority. So there won't be any main challenge from the opposition. Of course, the Conservatives will lead the opposition. They are still the main opposition party despite heavy losses. The Liberal Democrats will be a strong second with them. Now, you also have the SNP. You have Reform UK and the independent Labour Party candidates. Many of them, well, some of them are not independent. Some of them are more left-wing populist candidates that ran as independents. You will have a few voices in the House of Commons that are very strong against the Labour Party, but numerically they do not, compete with the sheer amount of seats that the Labour Party has. If anything, the main problem for the Labour Party going forward will be divides within the party. There has been division in the past, especially over the Israel-Palestine conflict. That is something that divides the Labour Party on, across a lot of lines. And so the Labour Party won't really have to fight off the Conservatives or Liberal Democrats, but they will have to worry about, of course, division within their own party on especially foreign policy issues. You also have some remnants of the Corbyn faction within the party which are very supportive of Palestine, whereas you have more people like Keir Starmer which are more supportive of the status quo, the kind of liberal order within the West, supportive of NATO, the EU, and of course Israel in terms of this question. So a very, very important and decisive issue for the Labour Party. This also had to do with Corbyn's expulsion from the party, and so you will have a kind of division within the party, but outside of it, of course, Labour Party won't have to worry about any challenges. Now, if we take a look at the map here, we can see that this, of course, there's a regional divide within the UK. The Labour Party performed very well in the Midlands and the North around the cities of Birmingham, Leeds, Manchester, Liverpool, where they do traditionally well, the industrial cities. And they did very well in not only the cities themselves, but also the suburbs, the metropolitan area, and some of the rural areas around those cities. The North has been traditionally a stronghold for the Labour Party, and they were able to win almost all of the seats in a lot of those constituencies. They've historically been able to win, or at least get close to. The Conservatives did well in the rural areas of the country, as they do, and of course in the South, where is somewhat of a stronghold for them. The Labour Party was also able to win a lot of seats in the Scotland region, in the urban part of Scotland around Edinburgh and Glasgow. They have not won a significant amount of seats here since Tony Blair's landslide victory in 1997. This is the last time that the Labour Party won in Scotland, or at least was the largest party in Scotland. Since then, the Conservatives, the Lib Dems, and the SNP have been kind of taken over. But in this election, that changed. The SNP lost almost all of the seats within the urban region. They only held on to a few of the rural seats in the north, and we can see that the belt around Edinburgh and Glasgow went almost entirely to the Labour Party, with a few going to, of course, the Lib Dems and then some Conservative in the north. Also, Wales, you had a strong support for the Labour Party around the city of Cardiff, which is, of course, a stronghold for them. And then if you look at the city of London, we see, the capital. This is the largest city. Most of the city of London went for the Labour Party. They made significant gains here, with, of course, some of the outskirts going to the Conservatives or the Liberal Democrats. In the south of the country, the Liberal Democrats made significant gains. The south is a lot more rural, middle class, and so you have a kind of a divide between the country, whereas in the North, the Labour Party is a very strong challenge by the Conservatives. In the South, it's more Conservatives are dominant, and the main opposition to the Conservatives in a lot of these constituencies is not the Labour Party, but actually the Liberal Democrats, and they were, with the collapse of the Conservatives, able to win in a lot of seats here in the South, also a few in London. Now, if we take a look at Reform UK, Nigel Farage himself was able to win his seat of Clacton handily. He, of course, has run in Parliament 8 times. He's failed all the times before, but of course, in this case, he was able to win the seat by over 10 points, by around 10,000 votes, beating the Conservatives there. Most of the constituencies that Reform UK won were, of course, seats that voted heavily for Brexit. They were targeted because of that region. They were seats that were very, supportive of Farage and UKIP, and so 4 of the seats Reform UK won were on the coast. They were very heavily Brexit voting constituencies, and of course there was Nigel Farage, also Richard Tice, one of the deputy leaders of the party. So Reform UK was able to break through and win some seats, not as many as maybe they were hoping to, or, well, this was about what they were expected to get, but of course they won a lot more votes. If you take a look at some of the northern constituencies, Reform UK was actually second place in a lot of districts up in the north. And so you see kind of a divide between the north and south, whereas the north is dominated by the Labour Party, followed by a strong Reform UK. In the south, it's more dominated by the Conservatives, followed by a strong Liberal Democrat. So you have a blue and orange in the south, and then a red and light blue kind of in the north. So a lot of constituencies where Labour Party won, the Reform UK won second place, positioning themselves as maybe a opposition to the Labour Party, as a stronger opposition to the Labour Party than the Conservatives in a lot of these seats. So, of course, there is a big regional divide within the UK. This has kind of been here for a long time, but this is why the result looks the way it does. Of course, with proportional representation, it can be kind of hard to understand looking from a German or Austrian or perspective from a country that uses proportional representation. But if we see this map, we can see that, of course, the party that wins each of these seats is the one that wins those seats. The amount of votes you get doesn't matter, but the votes do tell us kind of do give us a gauge on what the situation is in the country. It might not translate into an outcome, but it does show, of course, the Labour Party is weak. They did win a huge majority, but they do not have a large support amongst the country. This could be a problem for them in future elections, showing that if there's an opposition around the right, maybe the Conservatives and Reform UK were to form an alliance, or maybe a new party together, they could beat the Labour Party. The Liberal Democrats are very strong, with a stable result. So this election was decisive. It was kind of this... was a result that was in line with what the polls were showing. So I wanted to just give a update on what happened. It's been a few days, but I've been traveling, so I wasn't able to make a video right after that happened. But I did want to kind of give an overview of the votes, the seats, and kind of also show why the things happened the way they did, why, of course, Labour was able to win a big majority with only 33% of the vote. So, of course, after this video, I will go back to focusing on the German state elections that we will have in September, and the Austrian elections around the same time. But as of now, I just wanted to give this update for everyone covering the UK general election, because, of course, the UK is not the main focus of this channel, but it is a general election in a major major European country, rather. So I wanted to give this video. So I hope everyone liked it. If you do, please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you all for watching.